Hi, this is Rob Addison again. And what we're going to do now is give you a short, brief walkthrough of the GRAPA standard controls for the Interconnect line of business. So this tutorial is just to give you a brief walkthrough. You should have a copy of the spreadsheet. Nothing that I'm saying should be new to you because we covered all of these things in the class pretty thoroughly. And you still have your slides available, and a lot of this information you should already know. So what we're doing is making sure that everybody understands all the different parts of the control spreadsheet so that when you begin the revenue mapping exercises, you're fully armed with the information that you need. So let's begin. This is our title page. This is the Interconnect line of business standard control set. The first thing we look at is the Interconnect controls registry, which is the master list of all of the domains within the Interconnect line of business. So what we have listed here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we've listed the 10 main domains that could be in scope for your Interconnect revenue mapping exercise. What you'll need to do is sit down with your managers and review these 10 domains and decide which ones you want to include in your mapping exercise and which ones you don't. So the access architectures, the trunk groups, the firewalls, the soft switches, all of those different ways that people get into your network for Interconnect and all the proper controls for that. That will be in the network operations area. The second one is the service delivery architecture. That will be the switches, the gateway MSCs, the different network devices that are involved in delivering the Interconnect voice services, and the routing table controls and the other controls in the network area itself. The next three domains are in the billing area, the billing architecture, mediation system controls, Interconnect billing system controls on a daily basis, Interconnect billing controls on a monthly basis. So those are all the bread and butter of the revenue assurance area. Those controls should be very familiar to everyone. We then have the partner protocol controls, assuring the terms and conditions of the Interconnect agreements, assuring the profitability and the margins generated for the Interconnect line of business, controls over rate and routing changes, controls over the settlement process, and controls over the selection of partners. So again, you want to talk to your manager about which ones you're going to take on. Remember what you're going to do for every domain that you're going to be mapping controls. You're going to need to get a subject matter expert. That is a person that is part of the operational area that's familiar with those different operational constraints so that you can review the controls with them and do your mapping. Now, when you do your mapping for Interconnect, what you're going to do is pull up the spreadsheet with the controls for that area. And the first thing you're going to do is determine how many standard controls are there listed overall. Then how many of those are actually applicable to your environment. So for example, if you don't have soft switches, if you don't have any VoIP gateways into your Interconnect business, those controls will drop out, so you'll have less that apply than the standard list. So after you've done that, you're going to go, when you do your mapping, you're going to tell us how many of those controls are actually being done, and you're going to score the controls on a score of 1 to 5. And then you're going to average that score and put it here. So for each domain, you're going to do the mapping and scoring, and then you're going to add up the number of controls and average the score and show it here in this sheet. So what we've got here is our main driver, our controls registry. You're going to put the name of your subject matter expert and your contact information, the scheduling information about when you're going to talk to them, and any specific findings that you had from that interview. So this is your main driver for the revenue mapping process. So let's look at the individual domains very quickly. This is the access architecture domain. This is where we're making sure that our trunk groups are physically secure and inventoried so that we don't have people attaching trunk groups that are unauthorized. The physical security and logical security for our points of interconnect and our gateway MSCs, and making sure that the logins and passwords and all the reference information in those switches is secure. Making sure that there's a change management procedure so that whenever anyone makes changes to the network elements, that we know about it before it has revenue effect. And then we have the soft switch VoIP gateway security, which is also very important. Our next domain is the service delivery architecture. This is the controls over the switches that deliver the business themselves. Most important are switch peg count controls. These are the controls that let me make sure that I'm aware of all traffic coming into and out of a point of interconnect or a gateway MSC. We can use this by comparing the switch activity against the rated CDRs, by securing the trunk group activity against the switch activity. There's a lot of different ways to do peg count controls, but it's very important because it's the only way we can be sure that there's no illegal traffic getting into or out of our network. We then have synchronization of our HLRs, A number reference tables for wireline networks, B number routing tables for GSM networks, trunk group routing tables, or what are called APG routing tables, the billing rules tables that are in switches, the USSD code tables, the physical security, logical security, and change management for those switches. So again, in our network assurance and operations day of the class, we talked about all of these controls. This is where you're making sure that your routing tables have logins and passwords, that you're auditing these tables, and that everything in the service delivery area is tight. The next area is the mediation controls. Again, classical mediation, the same as for postpaid, except now we're verifying that these rules and business rules are intact and working for the interconnect line of business. So we have CDR transport, making sure the CDRs get delivered from the switch, most typically using our serial number verification, the I/O controls, filtration, suspension, error, aging, business rule audits, physical logical security, and change management. Again, all pretty standard things that we've covered in several other lines of business. This is where you're going to make sure that all these are done. And just as a reminder, what we're doing here is for each of these controls, talking to the operational area, in this case the mediation operations people, and verifying, does it apply in my case? How do they do it? I checked it doesn't exist. I checked they don't have a control. It does exist, but I'm not sure if it's strong enough. It has been calibrated. It's of an appropriate strength. Not only is it calibrated of the appropriate strength, but the operational people take conscious responsibility for running it. And the score of 5 is where revenue assurance or some other compliance group regularly checks that. So this is the scoring process that you're going to do on each of these domains. We then have the daily interconnect billing cycle controls, all of the same controls as for postpaid billing and as for mediation. The big difference being many of them will be does not apply, as we see marked here. It says not applicable, NA. That's because they don't do those functions in this daily cycle run. So the CDR transport or I/O filtration, all the same controls as for a mediation system, and then the daily rating, rate, and credit controls that are part of the running of the daily interconnect billing system. We then have the monthly controls. Again, all of the same controls as a postpaid billing system on monthly. The CDR transport, we don't have CDR transport, the I/O, the filtration, the suspension, all possibly being done. Logical physical security. And then, of course, the monthly rates, the generation of the settlements, the revenue recognition, verification of the partner's identity, etc. We then move into the partner-specific controls, terms and conditions assurance, making sure that the terms and conditions associated with each partnership are understood and enforced. We have a special kind of a GRAPA control called a registry. A registry is any physical document, database, or system where we know that we have a system of record that verifiably and definitively defines the terms and conditions associated with this contract. So it could be the written contract itself, it could be a database, whatever. Existence verification is where we confirm that the Terms and Conditions Registry even exists, that it's not just some people remember or what people pass on by word of mouth. We then have the second control, which is verifying the accuracy of the Terms and Conditions Registry, where we make sure that it's up to date and correct. And then we have the 3 terms and condition verifications: rate notification compliance, that the partners and the Interconnect group are following the rate notification procedures as outlined; the ASR compliance, making sure that the quality of the line is being monitored and fed back into the settlement process; and then volume discount compliance, making sure that those or any other commercial terms are being verified as well. From there, we move to the Interconnect margin controls area. The margin controls are very important for many organizations. It is very easy to move into negative margins, or what we call red margins, when costs change and the systems do not adapt quickly enough to that. So we have verification that the margin control exists. The margin controls are usually a daily margin report, which describes the profit generated by destination, by partner, by trunk group, by day. So we're verifying that the control exists. Then we verify that there are controls in place so that when the margin gets too far off from that set by management, that there is an alarm, and that we're doing trending analysis. We then have the rate change verification. Rate changes can be a huge job for an Interconnect line of business. Again, we have the rate change terms and conditions registry, the rate change incident log, where we verify every time a rate change has been officially logged in and recognize that we need to address it. We have the incident log itself, that we're complying to the rules for how it's run. We then have rate change decision making, where we analyze the margin and routing and decide the proper method, and then verifying that the rate change has been put in, and then verifying that the routing change has been put in. We then have the IP settlement process, making sure that the Interconnect line of business has settlement controls. Settlement controls typically involve a settlement log where we track every settlement, our number, their number, what was settled upon, who was the negotiator, and what was agreed upon, and what were the conditions associated with that. We then have the settlement invoice audit, where we typically have a revenue assurance control, where revenue assurance re-verifies all the settlement numbers before it goes to settlement. And then the forced CDR reconciliation, where we demand CDRs from partners and force a CDR, one-on-one CDR match, to make sure that we understand why there are settlement discrepancies. The last area is the partner selection controls. This is very rarely included in the revenue assurance charter. Usually this is an internal audit function, but that's making sure that the partner selection policies and procedures are documented and that there is proper compliance. So that's a quick walkthrough of these controls. As I said, we covered all of these in the training class over a 3-4 day period. So we're just doing this to give you a reminder and get you a mindset so you can think about where you're going to get your subject matter expert, what you're going to talk to them about, and how you're going to score these controls. So we'll pass with that and talk to you later.